Liverpool's hopes of a 100-point Premier League season are over after they lost to Arsenal for the first time since April 2015. Virgil van Dijk and Becker were at fault for the 2 goals. It's not too often you can question the performances of those two, but for Liverpool, they were not the only pair to misfire at the Emirates Stadium. It was very much a performance of a team who know they've already wrapped up the Premier League title with plenty of matches to spare, with the rest of their fixtures to be played out in empty stadiums too. Joining me here on this live debrief on the Blood Red channel to react to another disappointing result for Liverpool is fellow Liverpool Echo writer Theo Squires. And Theo, first of all, before we properly dissect that showing from Jurgen Klopp's side, just your initial thoughts at the full-time whistle.
It's one of frustration, Matt. It's basically the same as it was on Saturday, isn't it? It's another feeling of, this season, it could have been Liverpool the best ever in Premier League history. And for all these various reasons, it hasn't happened. But then that shows how far Liverpool have come. Because between us, we've said so many times on all the podcasts over the season, it doesn't matter what records Liverpool break as long as they get their hands on that trophy. And this time next week, they'll be getting their hands on that trophy. They have won the Premier League. But it still feels really disappointing that it's not quite with the same level of performances that we saw for the most majority of the season. Like, you think it was only February when they lost for the first time. It was only a couple of months ago we were talking about, a bit more than a couple of months, we were talking about them being potential invincibles. And the form's just not there at the moment for various reasons. I suppose you can't really fault the players as such because obviously the league's wrapped up. It's a bit not awkward. It's a bit weird playing without the fans in the stadiums and all this. Obviously, the mentality is going to drop a little bit when the consistency levels are being so high. But you're speaking to Liverpool fans a year ago, 2 years ago, that are biting your hands off for all this. So it is, I suppose, a positive and the negative that it shows just how good a team Jurgen Klopp has built.
Yeah, understandable. I think that they've dropped off a little bit. The Reds, of course, needed to win all 3 of their remaining matches heading into the game tonight to beat Manchester City's 100-point season. They can now only finish on a maximum of 99, of course, 2 more than what they picked up last season. And Theo, it didn't look like Liverpool's players were too fussed about that record, but should they have been?
Yes, I reckon they should have done it, especially it seems more with what's happened this week with obviously the sort of war of words between Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola, because you can rest assured that rivalry is going to be a bit more heated next season. The seeds have already been sown for them both going at it again. And it would have been a real chance for Liverpool to deliver that mental blow to Manchester City that they've been so dominant over the last few seasons. And Liverpool have run them so close last year and then just completely smashed everything this year. So to fall short, it is disappointing there. It should have been something that they wanted. They should have been going out to be the best team out there. But then I suppose when you've got the medal going around your necks, that is enough. It isn't for the fans. But these players, they're serial winners now. They've got the taste of trophies for the past 18 months, and they'll want to go again next season. Is it a missed opportunity to not record your best ever season? Yes, probably is. But then what would you rather say to these players at the end of their careers? You've won Premier League, Champions League multiple times, or you win the Premier League once, but you did it by the record points. So it is more about the quantity trophies than the quality, if we're being honest. Maybe they should have been a bit more up for it, but it's just weird watching them at the moment because it's like almost going through the motions a bit. They're not as there, they're not as committed as they have been earlier in the season. But then I think that's the same across the rest of the Premier League. And it's easy to forget that they're not used to playing every single 3-4 days. They are, as what they are at the moment. Granted, Liverpool have got Champions League football and there are cup competitions early in the season, but it is with a bit more heatedness at the moment, isn't it? And teams are getting tired. It's only Manchester City that seem to be going out and performing week in, week out. Hopefully get a break at the end of the season and they can be really refreshed when they go again next season. And we'll see a return to the standards that Liverpool had set in the 2 years rather than the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, certainly Liverpool, I think it's fair to say, a team who sort of thrive in atmospheres. And as you say, that's not something they've been able to do in the last few weeks. But just to talk about tonight's game and the 3 goals, we'll go through them in order. Of course, Sadio Mane, the open, a really, really nicely worked goal. And that's a goal that we've seen Liverpool score a few times this season.
Yeah, that's what makes it so strange as a game, because Liverpool was so good for that first, 20, 25 minutes. I think overall, Arsenal only had, 2, 3 shots. Liverpool completely dominated them if you look at the stats. It was a goal we've seen Liverpool score time and time again. It is Jurgen Klopp trademark. A team tries to pass it out from the back and they're straight on them, putting them under pressure, winning the ball up the pitch, and then an assist coming from the fullback and one of the front three scoring a really good finish inside the box. It's what you want to see from Sadio Mane, what you want to see from Andy Robertson. Great to see them carrying on those. I suppose Sadio Mane needed a goal. He's carried on that run against Arsenal. And Kieran Robertson didn't have the best start after the restart. That's now, a goal and 2 assists in his last 3 games. So there's a couple of positives there. It's just, I suppose, shame they couldn't build on it for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and certainly Roberto Firmino played his part as well, winning the ball back, as you say. And I suppose there's been a little bit of criticism of him of late, but just goes to show really what the Brazilian can do. And 2020 as a whole has been a strange year. Virgil van Dijk making an uncharacteristic error just sort of makes that even more strange, Theo.
Yeah, it does, and it's one you don't really see from him at all. But the best make mistakes. I'm pretty sure you might remember Steven Gerrard had a few like them over the years for club and country. And I suppose it's just a team that's already won the Premier League, strolling through these last game of the seasons, because it's not really something you can usually fault him for. His concentration levels are right up there. It's probably not the best kick out to him. It's like Liverpool welcoming pressure straight away. It's ironic, Arsenal probably scoring 2 goals that Liverpool themselves normally score. The best back pass to him. Alisson nearly gets to it. We've seen time and time again when he is called under pressure and strikers try to round him, he normally stands tall, gets a good hand to it. But I think Lacazette was just really alert. Good finish from him, striker's instinct. But as Van Dijk's just said in the post-match interview, those are 2 goals that you don't want to be conceding. It's just, I suppose, a good thing that Liverpool are now doing it when the title's already won in games that are essentially dead rubbers than a month ago when they still had a title to win.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of non-Liverpool fans will try and latch on to that mistake from Van Dijk, but I think it's only his second error leading to a goal in 88 Premier League appearances for Liverpool so far. So not too bad a record, possibly the first one even, as you say, Theo. But the other mistake, of course, the other goal from Alisson, he would have wanted a clean sheet. Addison and Nick Pope, I should say, both conceding tonight, but it was an opportunity missed for him as well.
Yeah, it was. But mentioned the first mistake. I'm pretty sure it was Fulham when it was both Van Dijk and Alisson at fault for it. Do you remember when Ryan Babel scored last season? Yes. I suppose it's ironic that the next time they make a mistake leading to a goal, it's separate ones but in the same game. But yes, it was a poor kick from Alisson to give it to Lacazette. But then Liverpool welcoming pressure again with passing it back to the goalkeeper from the throw, and it wasn't the best throw. And he can be very frustrated with it. I think he was heard, wasn't he, afterwards say enough of the mistakes now to his teammates. But it's not something that you see very often from Alisson. Whilst Liverpool might not have been at their highest standards going for these 100 points or whatever, you know damn well that Alisson would want his hands on that Golden Gloves award and Mohamed Salah would want his hands on the Golden Boot award. So they'll see it as a missed opportunity, like it was for Saturday for Alisson. Was a real chance for him to reclaim top spot in the charts. We said at the weekend it was probably opportunity gone for him now. Well, I'd imagine it definitely is now. When you think Liverpool playing, so you're going for Champions League football, but they've won the main prize, haven't they? It's almost not the worst consolation. You've not got what you wanted in these final weeks when it's already won, but you've won the Premier League. As long as you're not making those mistakes when it really matters, you can get over it somewhat. The disappointment is there, but Jurgen Klopp will have enough time to turn it around with his team and learn from your mistakes, don't you? And Liverpool haven't made many mistakes in the past 18 months, 2 years. That's why they are where they are. And this will be something that they can learn from next season, to not have this complacency when they have won the success, when they have got these triumphs, because they'll just want to raise it up another level.
One thing they won't have to contend with next season, we don't think, is drinks breaks. And it's sort of been a theme of the restart, really. Liverpool switching off immediately after they've had that break in play. And it's probably just as well that those are not going to be in place next season, because Liverpool didn't cope with it well today as well.
Well, Liverpool are a team that it's all about this intensity, this rhythm, putting teams under pressure. And I suppose it's understandable if there is a drop-off there when opposition managers have had this chance to give them tactical advice or whatnot. But then it shouldn't be an excuse either, because you think, well, Liverpool have been able to have talks with Jurgen Klopp, and they're one of the best teams on the planet. They've been brilliant for 2 seasons now. And it shouldn't be a case of you lose concentration and your standards slip just because you've got this added break midway through a half. They're international footballers. It's not a foreign concept to them. They've been international tournaments like every summer when water breaks have had to be taken into account because of how hot it is. Same for pre-season fixtures like in your states or whatever. So it's something, it's not a good sign. You don't want to see them losing concentration because it is becoming almost a worrying trend now. But then if they had made the breaks about mandatory for next season, you can't imagine it'd be something that would still remain a weekly occurrence for this Liverpool team, because now when it's meandering towards the end of the season, when the title was already won, it's very different to starting again in September, October, when it's a whole new campaign and there's more prizes to defend.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I asked you the question over the weekend about whether Gini Wijnaldum missed a chance to impress against Burnley. So I suppose it's only fair to ask the same question, not just of him, but of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain this evening. I didn't think either of them did particularly well, but Chamberlain in particular has found starts pretty hard to come by of late.
Yeah, it was a big opportunity for him against his former club, against his former home, at his former home, and it would have been an opportunity that he'd have loved to take. But there's probably one where he'd have performed better if the fans were there. So I think he's this sort of player that does get a kick off the reactions in the crowd, like most players would. But it's one of the disappointing aspects, I think, in the last couple of weeks that Liverpool's midfield, like the defence are making mistakes. Granted, they've been a bit sloppy, which we haven't seen before. But the midfield just aren't imposing themselves on games the same way. The front three aren't as creative enough or not as sharp as enough in front of goal. But when you've lost your captain, Jordan Henderson, to injury until the end of the season, James Milner's, I think, has been a big miss as well as vice captain. They are lacking something in the middle of the park. Liverpool have got these 4 leaders. So you've got Henderson, Milner as captain, vice captain, Van Dijk's the third in command. And although we haven't seen him with the armband, Gini Wijnaldum is 4th in command. And you would like to see more from him. You would want someone to grab it by the scruff of the neck, take a bit of responsibility for it. And of course, midfield aren't quite doing it. So it's that leadership they are missing in the middle of the park. It was a surprise today that Naby Keita didn't start. I think after he was left out at the weekend, fans probably expected him to. And it was a bit better when he came on. He showed more going forward. But Liverpool were ultimately chasing the game then, and Arsenal were sitting deep. So it's not really a game you can properly judge him on. It'll be interesting to see what Jurgen Klopp does now against Chelsea, because I think he's come to the conclusion you can't have Oxlade-Chamberlain and Naby Keita in the same team. Oxlade-Chamberlain, he's had a few opportunities recently. He's not taken them. So that means Keita should come in there. He might have got the edge tonight just because it was against his former club. But that means it doesn't matter with Wijnaldum because the lack of midfield options are there. He'll probably keep his shirt alongside Fabinho, but he's still got a contract he's got to play for. He's still got to try and earn his future at the club. So if this is the beginning of a decline, and when Liverpool's still being linked with Thiago and the lack of creativity in that midfield, it's not worrying signs, but it does begin to slowly sow those seeds of, is this something that Liverpool need to keep an eye on? Is it the beginning of a changing of the guard in this midfield trio?
Yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. And I wonder whether James Milner will be back potentially for next week. I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. I think we have to touch on his challenge on Saka. Plenty of people, mainly Arsenal fans, it has to be said, saying it should have been a red card. I wonder what you made of that incident.
Well, we'll just saying, weren't we, before we went live, that it's a strange one to look back on, because when you watch it the first time, it seems pretty innocuous. And then you see the replays, and it's just that one still that looks really bad, where it's like middle of the leg, could be a leg breaker. But then you watch it again, slow motion, his leg's high, but he's not made full contact that you'd expect. It's a rush challenge, don't get me wrong. And you expect better from Alexander-Arnold, but then maybe it is just players are being a bit sloppy at the moment. You know, the whole context of the league at the moment with playing the summer, etc. I think a red card potentially have been harsh, even though it is a high foot. It's just one of those, like, the player's not gone down and like spinning in circles, is he, or properly screaming, which has probably done Trent a favour. We've seen players sent off for it in the past, but it's a bit too much to say he's got away with one when, if you watch it at real pace, it's not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on that one. I think in real time, I wasn't even sure if it was a yellow card, so no surprise really that the VAR didn't get involved and upgrade that to a red. Talking of players going down easily, I mean, Takumi Minamino very much didn't do that. There was a challenge on him inside the penalty area from, I think, Kieran Tierney, who came across in that second half. I mean, we criticise players all of the time for going down too easily. There's an argument there that he probably should have gone down and he might have got something.
Yeah, potentially, but you could argue that he should have been unhappy with his initial attempt to connect him with the ball to the shot anyway. He sort of like scuffed at it and then made not a meal of it, but then he's called for the foul. I think it's just a player wanting to impress, isn't it? Like, one of the criticisms of Takumi Minamino since he came in is he's not very physical, that he's having to get up to the physicality of the Premier League. So that was probably a reason why he's tried to stay on his feet. And he's still looking for his first goal involvement. So whilst winning a penalty would have been an assist if the penalty had been converted, he's a forward attacking player. He'd much rather score himself, I'm sure, get off the mark than win this penalty. He could have gone down, but then it's one of those 50-50 sort of penalties, isn't it? It's not a stonewaller. It's one where you want a bit of clarity there, but I think even with VAR, it's made it even more uncertain. It just makes it harder for referees to judge, and when they've got VAR in the ear, I think they make the easier decisions sometimes. But then it's been a recurring theme this season where Liverpool have had these half chances, I suppose, winning penalties, and it's not happened for whatever reasons. Like, Mohamed Salah's been going down in the box, not winning these spot kicks because he's beginning to get this reputation of going down too easily. Obviously, there was the one at the weekend with should Andy Robertson have had a penalty? And then you look to Manchester, and you see Manchester United and Manchester City getting penalties what seems like every game, every other game. And whilst you can't say it's a conspiracy or anything, it's one of those funny quirks in football and Premier League. There'll be seasons where Liverpool will be getting penalties left, right and centre. We have seen it in the past, 13-14, for example. Steven Gerrard scored a lot of penalties that season. But yeah, I wasn't convinced it was a penalty at the time watching it. I was more, I suppose, unsatisfied with Minamino's attempt at the shot because he didn't even snatch it. He just didn't connect properly with the ball. It was a sloppy attempt to connect. If he just leathered it with his left foot, Liverpool would probably been on level terms.
Yeah, it was a difficult game for Minamino to come on as a sub into Liverpool. Of course, not playing particularly well. But I mean, what did you make of his performance? Did he do enough for you?
He made an impact, that's for sure. But then it's easier to make an impact, so to speak, when Arsenal are winning and they're just defending so deep. Like, it's not as though Liverpool were going to be short of chances because they created chances throughout the game. But with so many bodies between them and the goal, they were going to find it harder. He almost scored, didn't he, within minutes of coming on with that left-footed strike that just went wide. And he's beginning to show glimpses, beginning to show signs of his talent. He is getting on the ball in the danger zone. It's just not quite happened for him yet. Then it's not happening for all of Liverpool's front three at the moment, really. They're going in and out of games, showing flashes, but not the consistent dominance they've shown earlier in the season. I thought Roberto Firmino was having a decent enough game when he was substituted. Mohamed Salah had a strange game where he didn't really do much, but he had a few chances and he was missing what would normally expect him to convert. Obviously, Sadio Mane was better than he was at the weekend. If you put Minamino in a front three where, say, with Mane and Salah, when they're on the top of the game and they could properly be connected, fluid, you'd probably see more from him. It's just him trying to find his feet in a Liverpool front three that is currently not at the top of his game.
Yeah, certainly. I'm sure he'll get more opportunities to impress next season. A final question then. Liverpool obviously not in the best form at the moment. 23 shots to Arsenal's 3 tonight, but still on the losing side. At what point, Theo, do Liverpool fans have to become a little bit worried? Do they need momentum ahead of next season?
This one's a hard one to call because looking at it now, you'd say Liverpool have just become the victims of having this long break mid-season with lockdown, when football was suspended, and then winning the title so early. But let's not forget, the form wasn't really there in that last month before the season was suspended. Obviously, got knocked out of the Champions League, got knocked out of the FA Cup, lost the first Premier League game to Watford. There were worrying signs there. And if they can have this break and regroup, we don't know what we're really going to see from them when they come back afterwards, because they've effectively had a break already for a semi-pre-season when football resumed. I suppose it helps that there isn't going to be room for complacency because they can see it as a completely new season. It's not just a case of finishing the Premier League campaign, finishing on their success, getting it over the line is a chance to defend the title. But I'd expect to see much more from Manchester City next season. Like, they'll be hurting that they've not been even close to winning the title this year. Obviously, Chelsea, they look like they could be a good side if they get it right in all areas across the pitch. They made some exciting signings. Manchester United, pains me to say it, but they look very good since football restarted. Bruno Fernandes does seem to be a almost missing piece of the jigsaw for them. And then you don't know what Jose Mourinho is going to do with Tottenham. You don't know what Mikel Arteta is going to do with Arsenal. It could be a lot more competitive next season. So Liverpool are going to need to be at the top of their game if they're going to be able to, say, defend this Premier League title. So if they're not, then this inconsistency, lack of hunger, whatever you want to call it, continues in the first few games of next season, that's when you should start to worry, because then it becomes more of a long-term problem. Like, the excuses are gone then. You can't put it down to anything else. It's the start of a new season. Granted, it might be a month, 6 weeks later than you expect, but Liverpool started this season so well. They started last season so well. So it would be a change of pace for them. And it is something that Jurgen Klopp would need to address. Granted, the transfer window would be open. Usually you could turn to the market, sign a player to try and get a bit of life into the squad. We've seen that happen before, and Liverpool haven't had that new impetus of life with new signings. But then the talk from Anfield is they're not going to spend big. They'll only be able to bring someone in if they sell someone. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't at the moment, really. The squad have done so well the last couple of seasons, and it's easy to say, oh, this is them on the decline now, they need a bit more. But it could just be tiredness, it could just be fatigue, complacency, whatever. It's a little bit too early to start getting worried. But as we've said earlier on this early signs of seeds beginning to be sown, you do have to start asking the question at some point, and it's whether they can learn from this, bounce back from this, or it is the start of a decline.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's going to be a proper title race next season. And as you say, there could be a few points, a few teams collecting plenty of points. The pressure off Liverpool then with the Premier League title this season already wrapped up, and that certainly showed tonight. Had you said before this one kicked off that defensive errors would decide the result, Liverpool fans would have been celebrating a victory, but that wasn't, of course, how it panned out. No game this weekend for Liverpool as the FA Cup semi-finals take centre stage, but we will be back a week today as the Reds take on Chelsea at Anfield. The match, of course, at the end of which Jordan Henderson will lift that Premier League trophy. For now, though, that's all we've got time for here on the Blood Red channel. Plenty more to come across the Liverpool Echo and Blood Red too, so make sure to subscribe. But until next time on the Blood Red channel, from myself and from Theo, it's goodbye for now.